My dad, he really was new to not only to the nautical archaeology program, but to academia. He had never taught a college class before. He had never gone to a four-year college himself, so he really had no perspective at all. And in a way, it was a good thing the annex wasn't ready, because the first ship lab that we taught in our garage, or he taught in our garage, and I kind of hung out on the sidelines to see what it was all about. But it was a great way for him to kind of get acclimated to academia, because it was a very relaxed environment and he could teach the way he felt familiar with. And then, of course, when we moved out to the annex, he had a third of the building, most of which was his ship lab and his drafting room, and that was just, well, he wrote one of his friends overseas and he said, "It is Mecca to me," which probably nobody has ever said about North Bryan before or since, but it really was for him. It was the culmination of a dream to have those kind of facilities.
So what went on in one of his classes?
It was interesting, because when I was working on my book, I asked some of his students, what was that like? Because, of course, my perspective, what I had seen, I was pretty young. And to every one of them, there were 8 students in the class, and they all said, we had never experienced anything like that before. It was very tactile, very hands-on. He would have them pick up a tool and strike a piece of wood and study the tool marks. And that was kind of their introduction to, one of the clues that a ship will give you as to how the ship was made is the tool marks. And so it started out very basic like that, and then kind of worked up from there, and then you studied different types of nautical architecture and things like that. But it was very much the kind of class my father would have wanted to take if he were taking it. So it was very hands-on, very practical.
So you, I assume, spent some time probably with him out there in his lab. What do you remember about the research annex?
I remember it seeming, well, first of all, very far away from everything, and almost abandoned in a sense. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of activity out there at the time, but within that one little building, there was always stuff going on. There were always students coming and going, and of course, my father was just, and I remember those initial months when he just couldn't believe that he had this facility. And if you look at the building today, it doesn't look like much, right? But to my dad, who, his drafting room had always been our dining room table, and his ship lab was our basement, and now suddenly he had actual facilities. They built him the custom drafting table of his dreams. He had always envisioned this thing with these cubbies underneath to put his ship plans and places for his tools, and they built it exactly as he designed it, and he'd been thinking about it for over a decade. So he was thrilled. He had actual spline weights. He didn't have to use soup cans anymore. It was nothing to look at on the outside, but inside he was just thrilled, and went on to do a lot of good work there.